So we're in Gimel, page 194. Likkutei Sichot for Vayikra. And yesterday we finished the first section, which was on Hachna, on submission. The next section is separation. So before, what he told us is that the submission is actually of the divine soul. That it's not enough for the divine soul to do what it wants to do, which would be to leave, as it were. It would become ascetic, it would become spiritual, or celibate, like in the cases of other places, and retreat from the world. But the divine soul has to work with the animal soul. And then it reaches a state that's higher than Havaya. Higher than Havaya usually means that it's a state that's above the Seder Ishtalshelus, that's above the order of creation.
But if it leaves, then the body doesn't work anymore.
The body works fine. The body is happy, very happy.
If the neshama leaves, then the body stops living.
No, it never leaves that. Well, there were cases where people were that spiritual that they completely left their bodies. It's called the Pashtuta Gashmiut. It's called the unraveling the physical. There is such a thing. But usually for most people it just means that they retreat from the world. They don't want attachments. They don't want connections to things. Okay.
But there was one Hasidic who used to say goodbye to his family.
Every time he went to them. The Midler Rebbe, when he was younger, had to be revived a few times. To tell you that it was caused, like if a doctor would see it, he would say, this person is now so spiritual that he's outside of the world. I don't know. The doctor would probably say he had a heart attack or something like that. But the feeling is the same. The experience is the same. Anyway, Gimel. Beseder hakavat be'ema b'gashmiut. So now we have another topic. How do you bring a behemoth? You bring an animal for a sacrifice. So there's two things that need to be done. The first thing you need to do is make sure that the animal doesn't have a blemish, a ritual blemish. For instance, has a chipped ear, it's missing, a nose. There's 24 different blemishes that it can have, and it has to be a blemish that doesn't heal. דרושה הייתה בדיקה מוקדמת אם אין במום, ורק אז ירצה לקורבן. So they had to be, they actually checked it, usually for 3 days, bdika, to see that it doesn't have these blemishes in its body. And only then can it be brought as a sacrifice. The same thing needs to be done when a person brings his own behema, his animal soul, as a sacrifice. Meaning he wants to bring it closer to Hashem. בעבודת הקרבת הבהמה הרוחנית צריכה להיות
Over?
There's a mistake. I don't know what it wanted to say. I don't know, but there has to be some kind of same type of test of the animal soul to make sure that nefesh habehemi tiyeh shlema v'lo yeh bamum. So the animal soul has to be checked in some way. What does it mean? Lefichach tchilat ha'avodah bdika. So the beginning of all service of Hashem is to check oneself, to make sure that everything is in its right place. What does that mean, literally, in practice? על האדם לבדוק בכל פינות נפשו במוחין, בשכל, במידות, ברגש, ובפרט בלבושים, מחשבה דיבור מעשה, כדי למצוא את הפרטים שאינם רואים ולתקנם. He says, before you commit your animal soul to serving Hashem, you have to make sure that it's whole. And that means that its thoughts are right, it has clean thoughts, that it has good emotions, good attributes. And especially the thought, speech, and action, the actions themselves. למען תהיה בדיקה דעתא דנפשי, לא בדרך מצוות אנשים ולמדע, עליו לדעת כי הדבר נוגע לחיי נפשו ממש. So, when people do this, they do it like they check their tzitzis on the talis. How long does it take to check the tzitzis on the talis? You do it every day? How long does it take you? So I don't do it every day. When I do it, it takes me like about second, 2, I don't know. I saw Rav Yitzchak once checking his tzitzis. I don't know if he does it when we're not looking, but when we were looking, I don't know if you noticed that we were looking or not. No, not half an hour, but he did it one by one. So I thought about it. No, he's a smart guy. It's not like he can't see whether something's missing, whether it's untied, and you just pull it a little tighter. So it's not that. He feels that this is a process that you need to go through because you're also, by doing this, you're also doing something in yourself. It's vicariously, it's affecting something. So it could be that it's just taking care, like zehirut. Right? You have to be careful. It's one of the qualities of Reb Pinchas ben Yair of becoming closer to Hashem. But what he says here is there has to be a data de nafshi. Every person knows where his problems are. So when you check something, you know where the problem spots are. You can't do it like just because just to throw a glance and that's it. You have to know that this is something that is critical for your very life. It's like when a pilot goes up in a plane, and especially little planes. But the big planes also, they do it to some extent. Before they get into the cockpit, they do an external check of the whole aircraft. And then when they're inside, they have a whole checklist that they have to check everything. And they know that if I didn't check something the right way, and I sort of fudged it and I just skipped, I could be putting myself in danger. So you do it seriously. It's still not clear here. What does this mean? The person has to check himself. וגם התיקונים הדרושים יבוצעו בפועל, שלא יודעו כי הדבר נוגע לחיי נפשו. And everything that it will fix, it will also fix the right way. So what does this mean? What does it mean? We'll see in a second. It's very interesting. כאשר יעסוק האדם בעבודת הבדיקה ויתבונן לדעת הדנף שמעמדו ומצבו, יתברר לו כי אף אם אמנם אינו ברגע זה בעל עבירה, והרי חטאתי נגדי תמיד. So if a person really looks at himself, well, the first thing he'll discover is that even if I'm not doing an avera right now, even if I did tshuva, I finished with my averas. I'm old. I don't have any strength anymore for my averas. I'm tired of them. Still, there's a concept that David HaMelech says, and these were called the two tmidim, okay? The two constant things that a person should have in his mind. One is shiviti v'ala negdi tamid. I should have Hashem in front of me always. But the second one is chatati negdi tamid. David says, my sins are in front of me all the time. He doesn't feel like a sinner. He's not saying I'm a sinner. This is not a guilt trip. He's saying that whatever I did wrong is still in front of me to remind me, first of all, to be lowly. Ve'iti shafal be'enai, should be lowly in my own eyes. We talked about that in Parshas Bo. What does that mean? That I don't have any license to feel arrogant over anyone else. And how do you check your arrogance? Every person has it. You can't. If you're normal, you have arrogance. You have a feeling of self-centeredness. It's impossible almost to get rid of it. So what do you have to do? You have to keep it in check. How do you keep it in check? That you remind yourself that I too, or rather, not I too, I have many, many, many sins that I'm carrying literally behind me, and once in a while I have to put them in front of me and see them. These are my past, so my past has to be in front of me. In David HaMelech's case, it was all the time. He remembered this all the time because he was always in connection with people. He was always in some kind of dialogue with a person. So as not to feel any kind of arrogance, he had to remind himself, I'm not any better than this person is. In fact, about this person, I don't know what his averos are. I don't know what his sins are. I know what mine are. So it could be that I'm 100 times worse, because about myself I know, about the other person I don't know. Again, this is not to feel guilt. It's to not have arrogance. It's to be able to check your arrogance. I can't feel higher or mightier than this other individual. החטאים שעבר במשך ימי, so this is the first thing. החטאים שעבר במשך ימי חלדו משחר נעוריו בכללם גם אלו שעבר לפני אותו לבר מצווה נשארו עדיין שכן לא תקנם לגמרי. A person needs to know that all the averos that I did, I still carry with me. How do I know that I carry them with me? It's a very harsh thing that the Rebbe is saying. When I first read this, I said, this is a submission. But no, it'll switch in a second. But it begins pretty harsh. The proof for this, he says, the proof is in the pudding. ההוכחה לכך שלא תיקן עדיין חטאיו ושלא שב בתשובה שלמה וראויה, that he still hasn't fixed them, is incredible proof. I never thought of this. If he had done tshuva the way the tshuva needs to be done, meaning he doesn't need to check himself anymore in these areas. He knows that he's finished with this. When he would be able to do things now that he wasn't able to do before he made the Avera. Because what does an Avera do when you do real tshuva? It becomes a burning fire underneath you to do a lot more. So do you feel, it's not the person hasn't fixed the Avera. Of course he has. He's done vidu, he's gone through Yom Kippur, Hashem's forgiven him. But tshuva means that, real tshuva means that zdonot nasot kizchuyot. If it's really tshuva ma'ava, from love, then the Avera, the sin, becomes a fire burning under the person to get him to do more. So do I feel that? Do I feel that because of my, or does thinking of my Averas make me lethargic? This is sort of like, okay, not this again. This is an interesting thing. The full transformation of an Avera means that it becomes a motivator to do more. So when I remember my Averas, how do I feel? Do I feel like, I have to get up now and do something? Or do I feel like, so Baruch Hashem, that's behind me? So if it's just Baruch Hashem that's behind me, so that's it, it's become like a mistake that I did. But when it really transforms into something, it becomes something useful. It becomes the wood burning underneath the stove. It becomes something that motivates you to do more. And that's the question, do you feel that way? But there's something more that needs to happen. We'll see in a second. שכן העובדה שקודם לכן היה שרוי בארץ צייה וצל מוות, הייתה צריכה לעורר בקרבו תשוקה גדולה ואהבה לאלוקות. Because when he sees that in the past I was steeped in this Avera and now I'm not. So what a relief, and it creates a yearning for God. כדי זדונותיו נעשו לו כזכויות, ואילו הוא יודע הרי שאין הדבר כן לדידו. So he says, for me, this is not the case. It didn't turn into a schus. It didn't become a schus. A schus would mean that the moment I would remember it, I would be motivated to burn with passion for Hashem. So he says, most of the people don't feel that. So that's a way to test it. That's the first test. But now there's another test. אדרבה, בשעה שהוא מתבונן במצבו כפי שהוא and his situation and where he is psychologically, he feels something else. הרי הוא חש כי הוא נתון במצב הפוך. He's actually in the opposite state. Not only is not remembering the Avera not causing him motivation and burning passion for Hashem, it's doing the opposite. אלא אף נותרה עבירה. But actually the Avera is still there. The yearning to do the Avera is usually still there. What's the proof for that? לפיכך נמשך הוא לעבירה. He can still understand why he was drawn to it. He can still understand that he is drawn to it. Avera goreret avera, and that's the meaning of an Avera pulls after it another Avera. They're like a train. And I didn't understand this until I read this Sichot. But what is he saying? He's saying that when you're stuck in an Avera, doing it makes you want it more. That's an incredible thing. That when you do something, you want it more. It increases your yearning for it. If you stop doing it, maybe for a while you'll think that I don't want it anymore. But the moment you bring it up again, so that same desire begins to awaken. So he sees, so there's two levels of tshuva that he's talking about here. The first level of tshuva is that at least I won't be drawn to it. He says, when I look at it and I look at the things that I did in the past, if they awaken in me a yearning, so that means that I haven't even done the first level of tshuva. The second level of tshuva is that not only does it not awaken in me a yearning for it, it awakens in me a yearning for Hashem. So what? How can this even be? I don't know if you have examples in your life, but how can it be that something that in the past I was attached to, that I was drawn to, suddenly causes the opposite? See, the explanation in psychology is very simple. In psychology, the answer is it's all energy. It's just psychological energy. Whatever you invest your energy in, that's where the water is going to flow. That's where the energy is going to flow. Energy is just raw. It doesn't have. It's not applied yet. It's just raw energy. If you use the energy to dig a conduit, to dig like a river has a bed, has a place where it advances. So it uses the energy of the water to dig that in. So the next time water flows, in America they don't see this, or in England they don't have this because they don't have any rivers that only flow when it rains. But in Israel you see this a lot. You go into you go to Yam HaMelech, on an odd day in the winter. There's nothing there. Everything looks dry. And then suddenly it rains 10 kilometers away. And out of nowhere, this gushing water comes in. And the water always follows the same path that it, forged in the previous times that it flowed. Because these are rain waters that flow down. So the same thing happens in psychological energy. The energy is there, and we use it to impress upon ourselves certain behaviors. And those behaviors, they create beds, they create tributaries, they create paths in the psyche that the energy will then find it easier to flow through. What needs to happen? Well, tshuva means switching the direction. That if until now the water was flowing here, I want it to flow in the other direction.
But it doesn't flow uphill. Water doesn't flow uphill.
It's not uphill. It's just a different direction. It doesn't have to be uphill. It's not to break the laws of physics. Because in behavior, it's just adopting a different behavior. Now, we see the behavior is something external. How much could it affect me? But it affects tremendously. After you adopt a behavior and you repeat it many, many times, it creates a new direction for the flow, but more importantly, it creates identity. It changes who you are. This is an amazing thing. This is like an awakening from below. It's not like that suddenly I became someone else because I had this incredible insight. He's talking here about regular hard work. It just means that if until now I was doing A, now I'm going to start doing B. And if I do B really for long enough and I put my intent into it, then the next time energy looks at that, even it's like, just not there. And it flows even stronger in the other direction because it says, that's not me. I can't be that person anymore. I hate that. I can't stand that thing that I was. I want to be this new thing that I am. And it says you can get to that level. Kilomar, hamatzav shel v'chatati negdi tamid, the state in which a person is considering his past transgressions. אינו רק מבחינה זו שבמעמדו העכשווי אין די בתשובה הקודמת שלו וזקוק הוא לתשובה נעלית ממנה. אלא גם מבחינה זו שלא תיקן כלל את ענייניו, כי מהווים הם מסך מבדיל בינו לבין אביו שבשמיים, המפסיק ומונע את עבודת השם. It's not just when a person hasn't done any tshuva at all. חטאתי נגדי תמיד is all the time. The consideration that I used to have a different path that I was following, my energy used to be expended in a different direction. That consideration is used all the time. It's useful always. And it should always awaken in me the need to go in the other direction now. That's why it creates more energy. Because otherwise, what's burning under the stove? My past sin is gone. I don't have anything to do with it anymore. I'm not doing it. Just even considering that this is where I used to be. Wow, how much I don't want to be that person anymore. Like I remember what it felt like to be that person. I don't want to be that person anymore. So that gives added motivation to follow the other path. But of course this doesn't work well if you haven't forged another path. If you're just angry at yourself and it could lead to self-loathing, that's not a good idea. It's not a good idea to exercise this before you have another path, before you are also another person. I told you once the parable that Rav Steinsaltz told me about this. He said, very simple thought, but it helps people a lot in understanding how to deal with their averos. He says that when a person's stuck neck deep in mud, you don't throw him a towel. It's not going to help. The towel is going to be just as muddy as he is in 3 seconds. When do you get the towel? After you've gotten out of the mud and you've washed yourself, then the towel has some purpose. And this whole thing doesn't have purpose. You can't do chatati negdi tamid when you're still stuck in the avera. In fact, that will lead to self-loathing. You don't do this thing. You have to be careful with this because these are questions of identity. And identity is a tricky subject. And you don't want a person to have self-hate. I have to understand, what I'm stuck in, I'm stuck in. I have to first get out of there. How do you get out of there? To get out of there, you have to do what the sages say, that day by day by day by day, you forge a different path. Slowly, slowly, you make another path. You make it until you feel that when you wake up in the morning, you're more naturally inclined to go in the good path than you are to go in the path that you used to follow. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it takes 30 years. There's no rules for this. Sometimes it takes a month. You can't know. But you have to get out of the mud. And you have to have been able to take a shower. Once you've done that, the towel has a lot of use. And in fact, the best place to use the towel is looking at the mudslide that you were in, that we were stuck in before, and then clean yourself off even more. That causes the motivation. There I'm not going. Okay? I already know that that's not the place where I want to be. שאדם מתבונן בכל האמור ויודע גם את חשיבותם הגדולה של הקורבנות שתוכנם קירוב הכוחות והחושים עד כדי כללות באש של מעלה ורזה תקורבן העולה עד רזה די אינסוף, רזה הקורבן עולה עד רזה אינסוף, הרי הוא שואל את עצמו מה לו ולקורבנות כיצד ירצה לקורבן להשם בשעה שאין בו מתום. So if a person really understands what it means to be closer to Hashem, to be closer to God, it means a change of identity. Okay, what does it mean? The becoming closer to God means becoming one with the infinite. Because Raza, this is a very important statement from the Zohar, that the secret of the sacrifice goes all the way up to the secret of the infinite. And Raz itself equals infinite. Raz equals 207, Ein Sof also equals 207. They're the same thing. So the person, when he understands this, he says, what do you mean I want to dedicate myself, or any area of my life, I want to dedicate it to divine service? He has to understand that what it means is that the infinite is now going to flow through me in that area. If I'm able to dedicate myself in a particular area, then imagine now if I would take myself and fall back into the mud. It's 1,000 times worse. It's much better to get stuck in the mud and not be able to get out than it is to get out and not check yourself to make sure that you're not falling back into the same mud. Again, it's not the end of the world, but it's much worse. You have to understand it. It's better to even stay there to a certain extent than to get out and fall back in, even though that's what happens to a lot of people. So how, he says, how can I, that I have so many blemishes, reach the infinite? So the Prediger Rebbe had an answer to this. He said, כדי לצרץ קושייה זו מוסיף כבוד קדושת מורי וחמי אדמו"ר על פירוש אדמו"ר זקן המילה מכם. So yesterday we learned that מכם means from you. But now he added something more. מכם ובכם הדבר תלוי. למרות מעמדו מצבו בעובר ובעבר, תלוי הדבר בכם וכל אחד מישראל מסוגל לומר, מתי יגיעו מעשיי ומעשי אבותיי אברהם יצחק ויעקב. You have to know that a human being by definition is something that changes. That's the definition of a human being. There's no such thing as that I can't get rid of my old habits. There's no such... to be alive means to be a change. Constantly in shift, constantly in changing. That's the difference between man and God. Man is ani havaya lo shaniti am Hashem, I don't change. It's perpetual. Man, the only thing that's perpetual in man is change. And you can use this change in one of two directions. You can either use it to keep digging yourself a deeper and deeper trench in the direction that you don't want, or you can use the change to dig deeper and deeper, or begin to even dig a trench in the direction that you do want. But you're always changing. And so because of that, you can say, when will my actions achieve the level of my forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Meaning I can reach their level. The Rebbe has a tremendous thing in his Rishimos that explains this physically, using physics, using Pascal's law of liquids. Pascal's law basically says that the pressure per unit area of a column of a liquid is dependent only on the height of the liquid. You know this because you're a pharmacist, or at least you learned pharmacy. So you probably did a lot of that at some point. So it doesn't matter how big your vessel is. What matters is how high it is. And says Rebbe, all the souls, when you're talking about the soul, the pressure that a soul has on my life, my soul has on my life, it's exactly the same as everyone else's. Because all the souls came from the same place. They all come from the world of creation. Or you could say that they even have a source in the world of emanation. It doesn't matter, but the height is the same. So it doesn't matter how wide my soul is. It doesn't matter how much I can contain. It doesn't matter how much Torah I have in myself. Even the simplest person has this column of spiritual pressure above them that is affecting every place where they connect to reality. Meaning I have this ability to dig new trenches if I want to. I just have to want to. It's not easy. Nobody's saying that it just needs to be used. Now, I hope it doesn't cause distress, but it's really saying that there are things that you can't change. Okay, I can't change it right now. I cannot, I don't have the strength to say that. But don't give up on it. Because you have the pressure, you have the column of pressure above you that can exercise that influence on your life. It's just a question of convincing yourself that any trench in any direction that you want. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov did not start out as special people. They were regular people. But day after day after day after day, they kept digging in the same direction. The strongest of them was Yitzchak, because about him we know all the wells that he digged. But sometimes we forget that Abraham also dug wells, and Jacob also dug wells. They all dug wells. Okay. They all engaged in this type of work. And the work says, every day I have to take stock and decide, am I going in the direction that I want, or do I need to find a new direction where I want to dig? Okay, so we'll leave it at that, because there's a second thing that you need to do when you bring the animal as a sacrifice, and that I guess we'll do tomorrow. The day after, Wednesday we don't learn. I also understand sign language slowly.